Today, I want to speak about something that's often misunderstood, judged, or even feared. A woman choosing to live alone without boyfriends. Not because she can't have one, but because she chooses herself first. We live in a world that often tells women their value lies in being chosen by a man, by a relationship, by a romantic storyline. But what if the story she writes is her own? What if solitude is not loneliness, but freedom? A woman who lives alone is not incomplete. She's not waiting for someone to complete her. She is discovering her own rhythm, her voice, her strength, and her space. This is not a rejection of love. It's a deep embrace of self-love. Let's not mistake independence for bitterness or silence for sadness. Many women who choose this path are deeply fulfilled, beautifully grounded, and fully alive. It's time we celebrate the woman who builds her world on her own terms. Good morning/afternoon/evening, everyone. Today, I want to speak about something that's often misunderstood, judged, or even feared. A woman choosing to live alone without boyfriends, not because she can't have one, but because she chooses herself first. We live in a world that often tells women their value lies in being chosen by a man, by a relationship, by a romantic story. But what if the story she writes is her own? What if solitude is not loneliness, but freedom? A woman who lives alone is not incomplete. She's not waiting for someone to complete her. She is discovering her own rhythm, her voice, her strength, and her space. This is not a rejection of love. It's a deep embrace of self-love. Let's not mistake independence for bitterness or silence for sadness. Many women who choose this path are deeply fulfilled, beautifully grounded, and fully alive. It's time we celebrate the woman who builds her world on her own terms. When a woman chooses to live alone without boyfriends, she steps into a realm of freedom that many people never fully experience. It's not just the physical space of an apartment or a home. It's the mental, emotional, and spiritual space to design life on her own terms. Every choice becomes hers to make, and in that autonomy, she finds a power that is both quiet and undeniable. She doesn't have to compromise on her dreams to accommodate someone else's timeline. She's not negotiating where to live, what to eat, or how to spend her evenings. If she wants to stay up late reading, travel on a whim, or wake up early to write, she does it. If she wants to rearrange her entire space, quit her job to pursue a passion, or simply do nothing at all, there's no need to explain herself to anyone. Her life becomes a canvas. She's both the artist and the curator. Without a romantic partner in the picture, her energy doesn't get diluted by emotional labor that often comes with relationships. Explaining feelings, managing expectations, compromising on values, or constantly adjusting herself to fit someone else's world. She has the rare luxury of existing for herself, not through the lens of how someone else sees her or wants her to be. This freedom opens up space for clarity. It allows her to hear her own thoughts without interruption, to understand what she truly wants versus what she's been told she should want. It's not about being selfish. It's about being sovereign. For many women, this sovereignty becomes sacred. It is the foundation upon which they build their careers, nurture their passions, deepen their friendships, or explore their spirituality. There's a deep sense of satisfaction that comes with making choices without the filter of partnership. From the smallest decisions, what color to paint the walls, to the biggest ones, what direction to take in life, she leads with intuition, not obligation. She becomes her own anchor, her own compass, and her own guide. And perhaps one of the most profound freedoms she experiences is the freedom from performance. She no longer has to perform femininity, attraction, or emotional caretaking just to keep someone interested or satisfied. She can let herself be messy, quiet, radiant, raw, powerful, or soft, whatever she feels in the moment, without fear of being misunderstood or rejected. Her time becomes her own. Her mornings start with silence instead of someone else's schedule. Her weekends are built around rest, creativity, or adventure, whatever she needs most. She gets to invest deeply in herself without guilt, whether that means going back to school, starting a business, learning to cook, writing a book, or simply taking long walks to think and feel. She has the space to do it. This kind of freedom is not a rejection of love. It's an embrace of life. A woman living alone isn't isolating herself from connection. She's building a deep, solid connection with herself. And when she builds her life from that place of self-awareness and self-direction, she doesn't just live, she thrives. One of the most transformative outcomes of a woman choosing to live alone without a boyfriend is the development of emotional independence. This isn't just about handling life alone. It's about understanding, managing, and nurturing her emotional world without relying on someone else to do it for her. It's about becoming emotionally self-sufficient. And in that, she taps into a kind of resilience that can't be shaken by external circumstances. In relationships, especially ones where emotional dependency becomes the norm, it's common to outsource emotional regulation to the other person. A bad day gets soothed by a partner's comfort, self-doubt is eased through external validation, and moments of fear or insecurity are masked by someone else's attention. While that may feel like connection, it can often mask deeper emotional needs that go unmet when a woman never learns to sit with herself. But when a woman lives alone, without a romantic partner to lean on, she begins to face her emotions head on. There's no buffer. If she feels sadness, she sits with it. If anxiety rises, she learns how to breathe through it, journal it out, or meditate through the storm. Over time, she stops fearing her feelings and starts to understand them. Emotional independence is born not in perfection, but in those moments of solitude where she chooses to stay with herself rather than escape. She no longer waits for someone else to reassure her that she's enough. She begins to affirm that truth from within. Her self-worth isn't tethered to being desired, pursued, or loved by another. Instead, it's grounded in the way she shows up for herself, with gentleness, honesty, and unwavering loyalty. She learns to become her own safe place. This emotional independence also sharpens her awareness of boundaries. Without a relationship clouding her judgment or triggering patterns of codependency, she can observe how she reacts to stress, disappointment, or even joy. She can see where she gives too much, where she holds back, and what truly makes her feel secure. From that clarity, she begins to redefine what she will and will not allow in her emotional life. She no longer craves constant reassurance because she's built an inner dialogue of compassion and confidence. She stops needing someone to fix her emotions because she knows they're not broken. They're part of the human experience. And perhaps most importantly, she learns that she can feel deeply without those feelings overwhelming or controlling her. There's also a quiet strength in realizing she doesn't have to be emotionally available to everyone. She learns that not every sad moment requires consolation from another person. Not every joy needs to be shared to be valid. And not every fear demands external comfort. She becomes selective about who gets access to her emotional world because she's invested so much in creating stability within it. And with this kind of emotional grounding, she becomes more present, more self-awareness, more attuned to her needs, triggers, and healing. When she's upset, she doesn't lash out or run away. She pauses, reflects, processes. When she's happy, it's not performative, it's real, raw, and sacred. Emotional independence gives her the ability to ride the waves of life with grace because she's not just surviving, she's emotionally thriving. One of the most powerful ripple effects of a woman choosing to live alone without boyfriends is how she breaks the deeply ingrained stereotypes that have long shaped societal expectations of femininity, womanhood, and purpose. Her decision isn't just personal, it's revolutionary. It confronts and deconstructs narratives that have persisted for centuries, often quietly shaping women's identities from the inside out. For generations, the dominant script has been simple and clear. A woman's life is supposed to orbit around love, partnership, and caregiving. By a certain age, she should be in a relationship. Marriage and children are seen as the natural progression. If she chooses not to follow that path, she is often perceived as odd, incomplete, or even tragic. The stereotype of the lonely spinster or crazy cat lady hasn't disappeared. It's simply evolved into more subtle but equally limiting assumptions. So when a woman lives alone and does so with intention, joy, and fulfillment, she disrupts this narrative. She sends a bold message. A woman's life can be full and meaningful without being centered on romance. Her happiness, her success, her sense of worth aren't tied to having a partner by her side, and in doing so, she challenges the idea that being in a relationship is the default or the ultimate goal for every woman. Her lifestyle becomes a quiet rebellion against the cultural blueprint. She's not angry at love, nor is she dismissive of relationships, but she chooses to prioritize herself, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. And that choice alone pushes back against countless unspoken rules that have dictated how women should live, love, and relate to the world. Breaking stereotypes isn't always glamorous, though. There can be judgment. Family members may question her choices. Friends may try to set her up. Strangers might assume she's unhappy or secretly yearning for companionship. These projections are often not malicious. They come from people who are still operating within the framework society handed them. But every time she chooses to stand firm in her independence, she chips away at that framework. She proves that women can live rich, layered lives without a romantic partner at the center, that joy can come from solitude, creativity, friendship, spiritual growth, and personal exploration. That womanhood is not a single story, it's a spectrum of possibilities, and with every stereotype she defies, she opens the door wider for other women. She becomes a mirror and a model, showing others that it's okay to choose a different path. That worth is not something granted by another person's love, but something cultivated internally. She becomes the evidence that a woman's value doesn't decline with age or rise with a relationship status. It simply is steady, evolving, and complete. This act of stereotype making also challenges the media, which often portrays single women as either desperately seeking love or bitterly swearing it off. In contrast, her reality may be far more nuanced. She may love deeply, just not romantically. She may enjoy her own company more than the temporary high of dating. She may be wholeheartedly embracing a slower, quieter, and more intentional way of living, and that complexity resists the black and white boxes the world tries to place her in. What's more, she's not just redefining womanhood for others, she's redefining it for herself. She's unlearning the messages that told her she needed to be chosen to matter. She's rewriting the story that says independence equals isolation. And she's crafting a version of life that honors who she is, not who she's expected to be. When a woman chooses to live alone, without the constant presence or influence of a romantic partner, she opens up a rare and precious space, one that is often hard to come by in the fast-paced, distraction-filled world we live in. This space isn't just physical, it's mental, emotional, and spiritual. It becomes a sanctuary, not just from noise and obligation, but from the constant pull of external validation. It is in this space that she begins to access something truly transformative, deep reflection and clarity, without the energy of a relationship occupying her time, emotions, and thoughts. She's free to turn inward, to sit with herself, to really listen. In that silence, she hears the things that often go unnoticed in the hustle of daily life. Subtle desires, unresolved wounds, quiet intuitions, buried dreams. It's in this kind of solitude that she finally has the bandwidth to ask herself the hard questions. Who am I really? What do I believe? What have I been running from? What have I always wanted, but never had the courage to admit? These aren't questions she's forced to answer all at once. They unfold slowly over mornings with coffee and evenings filled with candlelight and thought. She might discover things about herself she didn't realize, habits that no longer serve her, belief systems she's inherited but never questioned, versions of herself she's outgrown. There's a clarity that comes from sitting still long enough to notice what's been whispering inside her all along. This reflection doesn't come from a place of loneliness, but from intention. She may journal, meditate, read, or simply stare out a window and let her thoughts move without judgment. She becomes a witness to her own patterns, fears, and evolving values, and from that place of awareness, she starts to make different choices. Ones that align more with who she truly is, rather than who she thought she needed to be to feel accepted, wanted, or successful. Living alone also removes the emotional noise that can cloud judgment in relationships. When we're constantly navigating someone else's needs, moods, and desires, it can be difficult to discern our own truth. In solitude, there's less pressure to accommodate or explain. She can evaluate her past without shame and envision her future without limits. She becomes the architect of her own healing, the narrator of her own story. There's a mental clarity that begins to sharpen too. Without the subtle or overt influence of a partner's preferences, she rediscovers her authentic tastes, what kind of music she actually enjoys, how she prefers to spend her weekend, what her ideal daily rhythm looks like. She may rearrange her space to suit her energy, follow her own flow throughout the day, and allow herself to change her mind without consulting anyone else. These small freedoms over time create a sense of grounded clarity that permeates every area of her life. Spiritually, she may reconnect with her deeper self or a sense of something greater. With fewer distractions, she may begin to seek answers to questions that go beyond the material. Why am I here? What is my purpose? What does peace actually feel like? She begins to trust her intuition more because she's no longer drowning it out with constant interaction or emotional entanglement. Her inner voice becomes louder, more confident, more trustworthy, and as that voice grows clearer, so does her path. The clarity she gains doesn't always lead to immediate action. Sometimes it simply invites her to rest, to observe, to feel without rushing to fix or change. And in that stillness, she often finds a deeper connection with herself than she ever found in the noise of constant companionship. This space also allows her to reimagine what love, success, fulfillment, and happiness look like. She no longer accepts inherited definitions. She has the freedom to redefine those concepts in ways that resonate with her spirit. Maybe success is not about climbing ladders, but about feeling at peace. Maybe love isn't something she has to chase, but something she cultivates within. Maybe happiness is not a destination, but a quiet, everyday choice she makes in the stillness of her own company. One of the most profound internal shifts that happens when a woman lives alone without boyfriends is the emergence of stronger boundaries and deeper self-respect. These two qualities, often undervalued in a society that encourages women to be endlessly accommodating, become essential pillars in her life. They are cultivated not through resistance to others, but through a deeper understanding of herself. When a woman lives alone, her life becomes a clear reflection of what she allows in. From the people she lets into her home to the thoughts she entertains in her mind, everything is a conscious choice. This level of autonomy forces her to reckon with her own limits and values. She no longer stretches herself thin trying to keep someone else comfortable. She no longer silences her truth for the sake of peace or contorts her identity for approval. There's no one else around to shape her day or dilute her instincts. So she begins to learn with incredible clarity what her boundaries actually are. And boundaries aren't just about saying no to others, they're about saying yes to yourself. They're about knowing what drains you and what fuels you, what behaviors you can no longer tolerate, and what environments you thrive in. Without the emotional entanglement of romantic relationships, she gets to fine-tune these boundaries without guilt. She becomes the gatekeeper of her energy, time, and peace. This clarity often starts small. Choosing not to answer a text right away, recognizing when a conversation feels heavy, identifying the people who leave her feeling depleted rather than empowered. But over time, these small decisions build into a strong sense of self-trust. She no longer second-guesses her instincts or over-explains her choices. She begins to operate from a place of alignment, not obligation. And with those boundaries comes an undeniable sense of self-respect. Not the performative kind that's rooted in appearances, but the quiet, steady kind that comes from honoring your truth. Living alone gives her the uninterrupted time to get familiar with her inner landscape, her fears, her strengths, her triggers, her dreams. She becomes more discerning. She stops letting people into her life just because they're available or persistent. She realizes that access to her energy is a privilege, not a right. Romantic relationships, when not rooted in mutual respect, can often erode personal boundaries, sometimes subtly, sometimes deeply. The pressure to be liked, to compromise, to be easygoing or nice can lead women to override their own comfort levels and emotional needs. But in solitude, she relearns how to stand firm in her values. She rediscovers the power of silence, of space, of choosing herself, even when it's uncomfortable. There is also a unique kind of empowerment that emerges when she no longer depends on someone else to validate her worth. She stops seeking applause for her choices. She doesn't need to be seen as doing well in the eyes of others. Her life becomes about her healing, her joy, her rhythm. She can rest when she needs rest, express herself without censoring, and walk away from anything that doesn't serve her highest self. As her self-respect grows, so does her ability to protect her peace. She no longer feels guilty for saying no. She doesn't overextend herself to gain approval. She stops trying to prove her value to people who can't see it. She starts to notice how her energy shifts around certain people, and she trusts those signals without needing evidence or explanation. Her emotional world becomes sacred ground, intimate, safe, and guarded by the strong boundaries she's taken time to build. These boundaries don't make her closed off, they make her discerning. She becomes more intentional with her connections, more careful with her heart, and more courageous in her solitude. She no longer fears being alone because she knows that being alone is not the same as being unworthy. In fact, it's often the path through which she remembers just how worthy she's always been. When a woman lives alone, without the distractions or entanglements of romantic relationships, she enters into a profound chapter of personal growth, one that unfolds quietly but powerfully in the everyday moments of solitude. Growth is no longer shaped by the needs or expectations of a partner. Instead, it emerges from her inner curiosity, her struggles, her quiet wins, and her daily choices. This period of her life becomes a sacred journey inward, a time where she becomes the student, the teacher, and the classroom all at once. Living alone, she no longer has the emotional cushion that often comes from companionship. There's no one else to distract her from discomfort or to rescue her from facing the parts of herself she has long ignored. She must now sit with her thoughts, her fears, her longings, and her truths. And while that can be unsettling at first, it becomes the very foundation upon which her personal growth takes root. In this space, she begins to confront the patterns she used to bypass with romance, people-pleasing, avoidance, self-doubt, or even the quiet fear of being alone. She starts to see herself clearly, and in that clarity, real transformation begins. She may begin to explore new interests, picking up books she never had time to read, learning new skills, revisiting passions she once shelved to prioritize others. Without the emotional labor that often comes with relationships, she can now invest that same energy back into herself. She becomes her own motivator, her own nurturer, and her own source of accountability. Growth is no longer linear or rushed. It's slow, organic, and deeply integrated. Personal growth in solitude also means learning to embrace imperfection. She begins to understand that she doesn't have to be fully healed or flawless to be worthy. Living alone allows her to fail without judgment, to fall apart and rebuild without an audience. She learns how to be tender with herself during hard days, how to offer herself grace instead of guilt, and how to find strength not in pushing through, but in slowing down. Emotional, she starts to unravel the root of her past behaviors. She may revisit old wounds, past relationships, or unresolved pain, not to dwell, but to understand. She learns to name her triggers, to identify where her boundaries were once crossed, to see where she abandoned herself for love or approval. In doing so, she becomes more emotionally intelligent, more self-aware, and more compassionate, not just with herself, but with others too. This kind of growth also extends into her sense of identity. Freed from the mirror of a partner's perception, she gets to redefine who she truly is. Not who she was told to be, not who she thought she needed to be to feel loved, but the raw, unfiltered version of herself that was always waiting underneath. She may change her appearance, her routines, her beliefs, even her entire worldview. As she peels back the layers and meets herself anew, spiritual, she may begin asking bigger questions. What does she believe in? What gives her peace? What does alignment feel like? This quest for meaning often becomes a quiet undercurrent in her life, leading her to explore mindfulness, meditation, prayer, or whatever practice brings her closer to a sense of inner truth. These explorations become deeply personal, and because they're not being shaped by anyone else's agenda, they carry a sense of authenticity that transforms her from the inside out. And then there's the growth that comes from learning how to be okay with being alone, not just tolerating it, but embracing it. The quiet nights, the solo meals, the silent mornings. All of these become opportunities to deepen her self-relationship. She realizes that her own company isn't something to endure, it's something to cherish. That in stillness, she finds wisdom. In solitude, she finds direction. In her own presence, she finds the kind of love that no one else could ever give her. This stage of life doesn't come with fanfare or constant affirmation from others, but it comes with a deeper knowing, a confidence that is rooted not in appearance or approval, but in self-mastery. Her growth may not be visible to the outside world, but it changes the way she moves, the way she speaks, the way she carries herself. She becomes more grounded, more discerning, more aware of her energy and how she uses it. She begins to shed the versions of herself that were created for survival, and instead steps into the woman she was always meant to become.